See the third question. How important are vulnerability and risk management for pre-disaster management? Okay. I told you, right? The focus is now going towards there. So how important are vulnerability and risk management for pre-disaster management? As an administrator, what are the key areas that you would focus on in a disaster management system? Yeah, please give the framework. Yeah. So how important are vulnerability and risk management for pre-disaster management? As an administrator, what are the key areas that you would focus in a disaster management system? So what is the basic demand of the question here? There are two components of the question. They are asking you what are the important vulnerability and risk assessments for pre-disaster. So first part is the pre-disaster. Second part is during disaster, what would you focus on the DMS, that is disaster management system. Okay. So basically, how important are vulnerability and risk assessment are you the first part of the question. So how important they are? When you know how vulnerable a region is, you will plan its development. You will plan how people should settle there. What kind of development is suitable? Okay. And then if it is highly vulnerable zone, you will try to reduce the human interference into that zone. So these are the important aspects of vulnerability. Then what is risk assessment? When you assess the risk, you will know the nature of vulnerability. That means what kind of risk this particular region is going to face. And if I know the risk potential of that area, then I'll also plan what should be the options during the disaster management. So I'll prepare the people before the disaster management if I know the risk potential of that area. And my administrative decisions and policy makings in those areas will be based on the risk assessment of the area. So we have recently the floods in Telangana. Okay. If we know what is the risk assessment of the particular area, then we will try to plan development. We'll try to have mitigation strategies. We'll also try to have our administrative come policy decisions based on the vulnerability and risk assessment. So these are the important parts of the vulnerability and risk assessment. So the second part of the question, as an administrator, what are the key areas that you would focus during the disaster management? So first focus will be to mitigate the loss of lives. Always as an administrator, your focus, first step is to see that not a single life is lost during the disaster. Leave over the property. First thing is lives. You can see recently Telangana floods. Many collectors spoke, many SPs spoke. What they said, please leave the homes and go away. Your property is not permanent, your life is permanent. That is the first focus. Then you will focus on what is called as property. How to save the property part of the next step. Okay. After that, you'll try to protect the area from undergoing serious damage because of the disaster. How do you do that? You basically plan how to mitigate those disasters. Okay, so the disaster management system is divided into various parts. One is the prevention and mitigation. Another is recovery and rehabilitation, PMRR. So prevention and mitigation you get to know when you have proper vulnerability and risk assessment system. But even then the disaster will strike. Then you have to do recovery and rehabilitation. During recovery, first thing is the prevention of loss of lives. Then in recovery and rehabilitation, moving people to the other areas and giving them proper food and medication. And once the disaster mitigates, you have to go and relocate them back. And in future, to not allow such disasters to impact the normal lives of the people, you need to plan. So that is what you have to do as an administrator. And then conclude by saying that disasters striking are inevitable, and they are going, every region which is vulnerable will face disaster in one form or the other. So the way forward would be to have proper risk profiling. It's called risk profiling. Risk profiling of various zones, and follow the strategy of PMRR, that is prevention, mitigation, recovery and rehabilitation, in all the areas which are marked for the disaster management. Clear? So who has written this answer and not discussed in last two classes? Anyone? Anyone? Rajni I have done last class. Jitendra last class I have done. Soumya. Indu, you have written third question? No. Who has written the third question? The points are very generic, Renuka. So for the first half of the question, try to write specific words like, zonation, risk mitigation, risk profiling, all these you have to write. Good. These points are good. But in disaster management, the important part is the jargon or the words you are using. So the words you are using also should be in the disaster language only. So try to inculcate that language of disaster. Risk profiling, vulnerability index, risk assessment, the positioning of the land with regard to zonation mapping. So if you use these words, it will look very systematic and in line with the question. Okay, especially for disaster management. So we'll do. Sriram, you have written third one.
Yes, sir.
So Sriram, you put the importance of risk assessment as the side heading.
Yeah, sir.
You have not put the importance of risk assessment and vulnerability. So you made certain points. You made certain points, okay, about the risk assessment, and then you have made all the points on risk assessment only, and then vulnerability you need to explain, right?
Yes, sir.
So then put a side heading, importance of risk assessment, importance of vulnerability, as we discussed, then explain in the context how they are important, and then come to the next part, which is the administrator.
Yes, sir.
Okay, step. So you are writing various steps. Okay. Okay, this is, the steps are good. So in each step you try to basically highlight the approach of PMRR, that is prevention, mitigation, recovery and rehabilitation, because that is the main aspect where any administrator has to work. So if you are a district collector, okay, what action you have to take during the disaster management, there will already be a book which is handed over to you. So you have to simply follow the instructions or the steps mentioned in that book. There is a sequence of events which you have to do as a collector when your area is impacted with flood. Okay, you will have some scope for innovation, no doubt, but it's not that you are the first collector who is going to face this flood situation and doing everything from the scratch. No, everything is documented. Every learning is systematically put. So basically you have to do what is already documented. So what you are saying, the various steps are good, that you will know, try to know the area, then try to do the risk profiling, see the prevention strategies, and then look at the long term. So that only you try to categorize in this prevention, mitigation, recovery, and rehabilitation, different ways. And then in the conclusion, maybe you can mention the Sendai framework. Okay.
Yes, sir.
See the fourth question now.